On episode 175 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to David Horsager, and he's going to tell you how you can boil any problem down to trust. That's right. It's all about trust today. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, good day and welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here. And it is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, speaking. And I just want to say, you know what? Thanks to you, the listener, new and old, whether this is your first time listening to the show or your 150 or 175th time listening to the show, it's great to have you here. We are rocketing up the charts lately. It's actually crazy. Like, I would have never thought hitting top 50 Canada, just under the top 10 in Papua New Guinea. Thank you to Papua New Guinea. We're sitting at number 11 right there currently at the current time of this recording. So amongst many other countries, but those are just a couple I wanted to highlight today. But nonetheless, let's get into the reason why I get to talk about that, and that is guests like David today. So today we're going to be talking about trust. And if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you know I say trust is the cornerstone of leadership. It is absolutely crucial to trust your people. And David is going to dive deep into this topic today. I often say, you know what? Trust right away. We have to trust our people right away. They're there to do a job and do a great job at that. So, yeah, it is that. So who is David anyway? Well, he's the CEO of the Trust Edge Leader Institute. He's a trust expert in residence at High Point University. He's been a Wall Street Journal bestselling author with the Trust Edge. He's advised leaders and delivered life-changing presentations across 6 continents and worked with companies like FedEx, Toyota, MIT, and York Yankees, not to mention the Department of Homeland Security. So he's got some street cred, right? David is all about this, so much that we're actually talking about his book, and that is The Trusted Leader, 8 Pillars That Drive Results. And you can grab a copy of your own at movingforwardleadership.com/175. That's where you can find the show notes for this episode. We go into topics such as why and how trust can help you achieve peak performance, the 8 pillars of trust, compassion, character, competency, how to, believe it or not, trust your toxic supervisor, and how to become trustworthy if you believe you actually are not. So lots of great topics in this one. You're going to want to listen to it. And you know what? Maybe is it time? It's time for you to sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation all about trust with David Horsager. We are live. David, welcome to the show. So great to have you here today.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
All right, so we're talking about your new book today, Trusted Leader, 8 Pillars That Drive Results. Love the ideology, love the name, and love the content in there. So first question out of the box is, how is trust going to drive peak performance for those leaders out there? Because here at the podcast, I talk about leadership in 3 domains, but hitting peak performance in those 3 domains, i.e. leading yourself, leading your team to individuals, and then leading your organization, i.e. to institutions. So let's kick off from there and go forward.
Well, my argument is this, and it goes back to my grad work 20 years ago, everything we do out of the Institute. I believe a lack of trust is the biggest expense of an organization. The biggest cost is always a trust issue. Most people are solving the wrong issue, and trust is the root issue. So on that leadership side, trust, you never have a leadership issue. The only reason I follow a leader or not is trust. In fact, the only reason I follow myself is that self-leadership issue is a trust issue. Because if I don't lead myself well, you said you start with self, you don't lead yourself well, you don't trust yourself. And many people don't build trust in their teams because they don't trust themselves well. So it's always a trust issue. In fact, in every domain it is. It's not, we think I have a sales issue. You don't. The only reason you buy something or not has something to do with trust. If you don't have an innovation issue, the only way to increase innovation on a team, the research shows, is increase trust in the team so they share ideas instead of fear sharing ideas. The only way to amplify a marketing message, one way only, and that is increase trust in the message. There's only one way to increase learning in a classroom. You have to increase trust either in the teacher, the content, or the psychological safety or trust of the room. The only way to deal with the diversity issues of our day, in fact, the biggest Harvard study shows diversity on its own pits people against each other, or can, unless you increase trust. Then you get the benefits, which are research-based also, of diversity, inclusion, equity. So you have to deal with the trust issue. Trust is different than some think. I mean, they think, oh, trust is just transparency. Well, some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second, right? So, it's also confidentiality. It's just, but when people can see trust is the core issue, they can drive results. And I kind of jumped in on 2 questions here, and I want to interact, but here's the real answer to your first question, and that is, the big reason is, this is back to my grad work, and now, how we show this is a lack of trust is the real biggest expense. It's always the biggest cost in a company, a board, an organization. You think of, this was my big kind of proof way back that was interesting to people and came out in the Trust Edge, but in Trusted Leader, we actually give a simpler way to show how to apply it quickly, but let's just think really quick about the cost of a lack of trust without the research. A lock is a good representation. The reason I put a lock on anything is because I don't trust you. So what's the cost? Well, 2 big costs. I got to pay for the lock, that's money, and I got to open it every time I go through the gate, that's time. Every time you have a lack of trust, you have a cost. You text someone you trust, it takes no time. Now write a text to someone you don't trust. Oh, how are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? There's always a cost. So, we can go into cost, but the first thing people need to see is the root issue. If we want to drive, we've used this work on 6 continents to drive corruption issues down in East Africa, to drive, New York Yankees sports companies, to drive attrition down, to triple sales, to gain market share. Once they see it as a trust issue, they're actually able to solve the real issue.
Wow. I've actually never had someone explained trust in that type of context. Hence why you probably wrote the book. How did you come up with these 8 pillars regarding trust?
Yeah, so in the original work, in my grad work really is where they came to light. And then we've now used them, in, like I said, global governments. We have certified Trust Edge coaches on 6 continents. Anybody wants to be one, let us know. It's an awesome community. But we have this framework we kept using more and more. Then someone else built a PhD on it. Then last year it was revalidated again by an outside university as the way trust is built globally. So first of all, it came out of my grad work, and that was just looking at what actually builds trust in leaders and organizations. It kept coming back to these 8, and I hope without ego, but a whole lot of research and work on 6 continents and work across industries, you can solve every organizational leadership issue against these 8. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying I know how to do everything. I am saying if you get the right language and solve against these, you're actually solving the real issue, instead of what people think is the issue. Like many people think we've got an engagement issue. You never do. The only way to increase engagement, you might have an engagement issue, but the only way to increase engagement, the research would show, is trust. If I got a net promoter score, we need more referrals. referrals. The problem is you don't get referrals with referrals. The research shows you have to increase trust to get more referrals. So if you want to increase this lagging indicator, you have to use trust to do it, and that's these 8 pillars.
Interesting. So basically, look at everything from a framework of trust, and that's what you're getting at to the core problem of any problem.
And then you can look against these 8. And
okay.
We can jump into the 8. I can give a quick overview of them, I guess.
Yeah. Let's do a quick overview, and then I'll probably end up cherry picking because I don't want to steal them all from you because that'll give someone no incentive to read the book.
I mean, in the book, you get takeaways you can use tomorrow morning to apply these 8. But for context, I'll give you the 8 because then you actually know a framework. It is a problem because people see that makes sense, and they think they know it all, like I did. And there's so much I can talk about all day about each, a full day on each of these 8 in our work. But let's just give them to them so people get context. Very quick overview. These 8 pillars. I wish it was 3 points in a poem like people want, but when 8 come out of research and you talk about trust, you got to give all 8, right? So number 1, not in order of importance necessarily, but we found that clarity. People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. Most people overcomplexify. Most people are not clear about the right things. A salesperson can be clear about how cool they are, how long they've been in business, without being clear about the benefit of that product to me, and they won't get the sale because they're not clear about the right things. Clarity wins. Number 2 is compassion. We learned that people don't trust those that don't have compassion beyond themselves. If they don't care about something, they may not even care about me, but if they don't care about something missional, something beyond themselves, it is hard to be accountable to someone who doesn't care about you at all. So compassion is number 2. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy. There's a framework for this in the book for companies because many people incentivize a lack of character in their organizations. They say even incentivize a lack of the character they say they want to have in an organization. So character. You'll see that these are all C words. That's not because of some kind of cheesy motivational book to have all C's. They each represent a research funnel and for clarity. So character. Number 4 is commitment. We trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. If you find someone that's left a legacy in your life or history, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, Jesus, Joan of Arc, it's somebody that was trusted at least in part because they were committed to something beyond themselves. So commitment. In fact, under this pillar is where you find how to rebuild trust if you ever want to come back to it. So, which we all need to do sometimes. The next pillar is connection, the ability to, actually I missed one there. Competency was one of the pillars, and that is, why I trust you, Scotty, to take my kids to the ball game. You've got compassion. You've got character. That doesn't mean I'll trust you, Scott, to give me a root canal, right? Because of competency. So you have to stay competent. If you're leading the way you were 10 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're selling the way you were 5 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're a teacher and you're teaching the way you were 30 years ago, I don't trust you. You got to stay fresh and relevant and capable. Next pillar is connection, the ability to connect and collaborate. Each of the pillars, by the way, when we look in organizations, or whether it's entrepreneurs or massive organizations, they're counterforces. So a counterforce in a big organization to connection and collaboration would be siloing, right? Or there's several for each of these. Just like compassion, a counterforce would be any of the isms or, hatefulness or even apathy or whatever. Okay, so next pillar is contribution. And the real word that comes under this research funnel is results. We trust those that contribute results. You've got to be a contributor of results. You can't just have compassion, character, and not contribute the results I expected or asked for. And finally, consistency. And consistency, whatever you do, you're going to be consistently, you're trusted for. The only way to build a brand is consistency of experience. The only way to build a reputation as a leader is consistency. So for good or bad, whatever you do consistently, I'll trust you for. If you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late, right? So those 8. And so these 8, I just want to make mention, we could go so deep and wide and contextualize how we use this globally and everything else, but it actually can be quite freeing because it can be quite simple. You can solve, if people write these down and put them at their desk, they can think, oh, I see the issue. It's a clarity issue. Oh, I see the issue. It's this, because they're solving the wrong things. People say, oh, it's an engagement issue. Like I said, or how about this? People say to me, David, you love C words. Isn't it ever a communication issue? Ladies and gentlemen, it is never, ever, ever, ever at the core a communication issue. Communication is happening all the time. Clear, the first pillar, Clear communication is trusted. Unclear is not. Compassionate communication is trust. Hateful communication is not. Consistent is inconsistent. High character is low character. So if you can define against these 8, you actually solve the real issue. That gives you a glimpse for context. So if we take these 8, and of course we out of the Institute, we measure trust in leaders and organizations so you can measure and close a gap, you can save millions of dollars quickly.
When I first got your book, my copy of it, and I went through, by the way, feel free to grab a copy through the show notes, folks, and you can grab those at movingforwardleadership.com/176, and the link is at...
Not feel free to get a copy. Come on, go get a copy. Trusted leader, David Horsager, for only like $20, you can get this work we're doing on 6 continents.
So anyway, when I got my copy and I looked at it and I skimmed through the contents as I do, and I noticed 8 pillars and they're all C words, but as I looked at them individually, I'm like, yes, this makes sense. Yes, this makes sense. Yes, this makes sense. Yes, this makes sense. But you said a few things that tweaked my interest in a number of them, and we're going to kind of bounce around here. I definitely want to hit character first. And you mentioned that organizations are incentivizing a lack of character. So one, why the hell are organizations out there doing that? And 2, what should they actually be doing to ensure they get what they need?
Well, we have a 7-step process for driving character in an organization. First, let me say this. There's a lie. People think that all your character is built by 12 years old. Some psychologists said it so everybody bought in. It's not true. People can go toward higher character or away from it.
Changing on a daily basis, man. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's 2 sides here of all of these pillars. One is individual leadership, like you start out with, which is really important, is how do I do what is right over what is easy? That was one of the defining factors of high character people. So that's a side we could talk about. But let's go over to the other side, and that is companies, organizations. So let's just take one question that every leader should ask at every strategic planning session, and that is there any way we're incentivizing against the character we say we want to have? Now, you can find the 7-step process in the book or in our other work, and I can go into it. I don't want to hide anything. I just want to keep going on task so we have things we can really get to. But that question would be a key one. So an example would be, Wells Fargo was found not long ago. It's a big bank in North America, and I'm not sure if it touches much in Canada, but one of the bigger headquarters are here in Minneapolis. They were incentivizing sales teams against the character they say want to have. It costs billions of dollars, right? But many times we'll see sales teams, as an example, incentivized against the character they say an organization wants to have. You can incentivize sales teams. You should incentivize sales teams for sales, but it's how you incentivize, right? It's in the work we're doing in East Africa. Until we're dealing with these bribery issues that have been around for hundreds of years, until we stop the incentive system for police officers to stop taking bribes, the system, you're not going to have bribery go down much. There are high character police officers, but it's so incentivized that you're incentivizing the character you want to have, right, in an organization. So this would happen with kids. If you kept telling a kid, once in a while you say not to lie, but you actually give them a chocolate bar every time they lie, they're going to learn to lie, right? So
living it right now.
Yes, it might be subtle, but this is a very important question. I mean, I know there's so much more to this, and we want to get to some of the other pillars. But if I was going to take one takeaway on this side, I would say, think about, is there any way we're incentivizing? And go through the 7-step process. It's right there. We consult on it. You pay us thousands of dollars. You can just get it right in the book, the 7-step process for an organization. But one of the questions is, am I incentivizing? Let's go to the people side, leadership side, because I really love your work and that you start with individual, because, organizations don't change. Teams don't change. Countries don't change. Only individuals do. But when an individual does, then a team, a company, a country, we've seen change. So we have to start with ourselves. For those listening, I would start with 2 questions under the character side. One, I would ask, would you follow you? Would you follow you? I want to be. There's a lot of people in at least that I've seen in my shoes, kind of, that are, opening keynoter for some of the biggest events in the world. And I'll watch motivational speakers that are on before me or after me at these big events, and I'll see them talk about success and then be drunk at the bar afterwards or whatever else. And the thing is, they're adored by fans that don't know them, but they're not loved at all by their closest people to them. I want to be most adored by my kids, my wife, my closest friends. I'm not perfect at all. They all know that. But I want to be most followed by my closest. High character people are most loved and adored by the closest people to them, not those farthest away. That would be a question to ask your heart and look yourself in the mirror, everybody, every day. And I have to do it myself. I'm not perfect in any of the stuff I teach. I just know what's true from the research. Okay. The second question I would ask is, do you have, this is a really great process. Many strategic planners are strategic consultants like me and our advisors and whatnot. They might help people with writing values, mission, vision, all that kind of stuff. But this is different. I would ask you, all leaders listening to this, do you have a set of 3 to 5 decision-making values? What I mean by that is not values in life, not my kids, my family, my whatever. And this is also in the book, but it is values you make every decision by. That will increase character and consistency and congruency in your decision-making process. I'm going off the rails here. Like you said, well, I could give so many things, so I guess we'll stay with something. One idea right here. So one of our values is decision-making values is excellence out of our organization. You touch our book, it's just higher quality than most in its space. We force the publishers to do that. We want it to feel right. Almost no other books in our space have that quality of paper. Almost no other books in our space have 2-color. But this didn't start this way. It was 12 years ago or whenever, more than that, when I wrote Trust Edge. I was not unknown to anybody, right? And I had this book, and I paid for the design because I wanted it to be beautiful. I paid for, of the 12 levels of bindings, I paid for the highest level of binding. I wanted hardcover. I mean, we talk about trust and excellence. I need it to feel that way. That's on brand for us. So I finally had 2 publishers interested. One was a dinky publisher. One was a New York publisher at the time, but not the biggest New York publisher, but an okay one. The New York publisher said, "Yeah, we'll take it. We'll put it on soft cover, yellowish paper, like all of our other cheap books. We make the most money, whatever." The little publisher said, "We'll do it just like you want. We'll even put a red ribbon in it, like a Bible. It'll feel trusted." And not to take anything away from God, but I'm just saying. So we went with, instead of this New York publisher, wow, I'd love to do that. We went with this dinky little publisher. We could go to bed every night saying, "Hey, we stuck with our values." Now the book did a miracle. Later became a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and later was bought out by the biggest publisher in the world, New York publisher. But you don't go for that. Either way, I could go to bed every night feeling good. And that New York publisher, Simon and Schuster, Free Press, then printed it exactly how the little publisher had done it, minus the ribbon, but quality. And now you see any of our books, Trust Edge, Daily Edge, the new book, Trusted Leader, they have that feel. And our brand, anything you touch out of the Institute, you have that feel. But that's only because we stayed making decisions by our values, not by what seemed like it could have been. I could go right to a New York publisher. This is it could reach more people. Isn't that good? We want to reach people. But we stayed on our values, and there was some great things to that. So there's stories of how our kids have held us to our values. I mean, we said we want to be generous, and we're sitting at the table. My oldest was 5 years old. I started, by the way, some of your entrepreneurs listening, we started our first company in 1999, black mold on the walls in a basement with no bathroom or kitchen of 86-year-old Clara Miller's house in not the greatest area of town, and that's where we lived for 2 years starting our business. We didn't have anything, and we had $1.40 to our name. And anyway, as we grew a little bit, your kids can tell too, and we said one of our values is be generous. And I was flying more, and I said, I think we should, get a new vehicle for Lisa because I'm gone more and with the kids and whatever. And she said, and my daughter said, "Well, shouldn't we give it away?" I was going to trade it in. And we ended up giving that Suburban to someone at our church that needed one instead of, and so that was because of a daughter holding you to the values you said you had.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great story at the end there, for sure. I just want to highlight a couple of themes I heard there. One was effectively lead by example. What you said, would you follow you, right? You got to lead by example. so that you build that trust with your team, so that they see that you are actually doing the things that you demand from your team. Because if you're not doing those things, if you say, hey, I need you here by 9, and you keep walking in 9:45, 9:30, 9:8, 58, whatever, constantly, we're like, well, the boss isn't showing up at 9. I have no meetings. I have nothing. I'm not a customer service. No one's waiting on me or anything. Why the heck do I have to be here for 9? I'll show up at 9:28, 5, because he's never in before 9:30 anyway. And he'll never know the difference. And suddenly that erodes that trust. So that you got to lead by that example. You got to do what you demand from your team. And holding to your values. I think that's so important. I was actually coaching a client not too long ago, earlier this week, actually, because I find holding to your values also helps to avoid the shiny object syndrome from a business standpoint, right? It's like, and this is exactly where this guy was going. He was like, "Ooh, shiny object over here." And I'm just like, "Okay, let's talk about this." And
So
we were
easy.
talking leadership, and I was just like, "Okay, so how does this fit in with your brand, your overall strategy? The rest of your team, your following. How are they going to see you as you go over to this shiny object, et cetera?" I start asking all these questions, and in the end, he said, "Wow, yeah, you're right. Like, this is not going to help me in a long term whatsoever." I'm like, it potentially could, but you're just not at that crossroads yet. Let's take it, put it in the idea bank, leave it there for a while, let it ferment a bit, and see if it pops back up when suddenly you're at that stage. So a lot of that, and I felt that holding him to his values is like, how does this reflect your strategy, your brand, your values, and all these things? How does that help? In the end, he's like, nope, never mind. So that, I love
Yeah.
it. I love the value of saying, and making decisions based off of that. That's how I do it. Whenever I get a guest request in, like, I've turned down a couple of big guests. Why? Because their message does not align with my values for this podcast. It's just that, yeah, they have massive followings, and they make one tweet, and I'll probably get X thousand more people downloading my show. And I tell you, that is a hard pill to swallow as a podcaster.
Yeah.
Right? You want that. You're like frothing at the mouth. You're always trying to get the more subscribers. But it's like, sorry, your values actually don't align with mine. Not saying that your message is not right. It's just not right for my show.
Mm-hmm.
And
And some of them
unfortunately,
just plain aren't right.
yeah, those ones I have no issues with. I just decline. But the moral of the story is, I use those values to make that decision.
Well,
Right?
and to tie this together, even on the pillars, you can see how they feed together. So,
Yeah, 100%.
clarity of values helps you lead with higher character. Consistency. Someone might say, well, I was clear about the vision at the annual meeting. I'm so clear at the annual meeting. Well, if you didn't share it consistently, the vision, every 21 days, now probably every 14 days, nobody knows the vision, so then they don't make decisions by it, so they don't have clarity that you said you had. Even if you had a level of clarity, you lost it because of inconsistency. Or you might say, we got a lack of commitment here. It might be directly lack of commitment. It might be there's not feeling cared about, compassion pillars, so there's no commitment. So they really all work together, and you can even things people are subtly thinking about in their head. Shouldn't empathy be in here? Well, yes, it is under compassion. Shouldn't vulnerability be a part of trust? It is under connection. So how they fit, they really work together to gain this being a really truly trusted leader. And that's really what I'm actually talking about, is a trustworthy leader. People say, couldn't I, you talk a lot about creating the most trusted leaders, brands, organizations, governments, and it's great to be trusted, but the problem is people can kind of manipulate the pillars to look trusted without actually being worthy of it. And what we want to do is have authentic trust, these 8-pillar framework, so that we're actually worthy of it.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. They are all connected, and it has to be. You as a leader, you can't be, this one trick pony, or I do this really well. No, sorry, you have to be it all. You have to be trustworthy. You have to have compassion. You have to have great character. You have to be competent. You have to have connection with your team. You have to have all the C's that you mentioned. And I think it's actually a good segue into the second one, which I want to talk about, and that is compassion, because we see it more and more. And the way I look at it and the way you talk about it, I hear emotional intelligence, and it's the big, the big,
A load of it.
it's the thing, the thing today that everyone's talking about. It's like really, when, like, this is not new. Again, I always say there's nothing new in leadership. It's just how we package it, and how it relates to people and stuff like this. And this is one of those things.
Yeah. So what I would jump in on that is EQ is critical. It's a big part of compassion and connection, and really several of the pillars. But what I wrote an article not too long ago. I can't remember if this was one of the ones that in Forbes or CEO World or where it was placed. I can't think of which placement it was, but probably people can find it on our media page. But I argue that TQ beats IQ and EQ. And so EQ is important, emotional intelligence. IQ hits the competency pillar, which isn't necessarily IQ like Einstein. It's like smarts in whatever you do. If you're a surgeon, you need that kind of IQ. If you're a whatever, it's being competent, right? But TQ brings kind of this IQ competency, EQ connection, compassion, empathy, all those things, plus TQ, which is trust quotient for us, and that is those together with trust, which is also character and commitment, right? So when to me, that's why TQ, trust quotient, is the most important. And that's why we measure trust. Our enterprise trust index, we use it in global pharmaceuticals, universities, and can close gaps and really help them solve key issues. But all the way down to a Trust Edge 360 or a Trust Edge a self-assessment, or even our conversational diagnostic, people can get a hint that, oh, I think I should close this gap next, and that would really help people trust me, follow me, be influenced by me more.
It's tough being alone as a leader. You're often in situations where you're not sure where to go. You're not sure what's the best decision. Yet, as Colin Powell once said, it's lonely at the top. And reality is, it takes time. Sure, you can read books and listen to podcasts such as this one, but nothing beats experience. But who has time for experience when you're at a situation right now that requires experience to lead yourself, your team, your organization through? That's where coaching comes in. You see, coaching enables you to unlock the experience in others. Right here, right now, you have 20 years of military service, plus 150 plus episodes of interviews and topics and research sitting at your disposal. So what are you waiting for? Are you ready to level up your game, become that leader that you know you're meant to be? Are you ready to go to the next level? If so, drop me a line, scott@movingforwardleadership.com, or swing by the website and book a discovery call through movingforwardleadership.com/book. And let's get you moving in the right direction, leading better, leading more effectively today, right here, right now. Starting off with leading yourself. And then let's focus on how you can build your high-performing team to drive your organization's output higher, faster, harder today. Not next week, not next month, but today. All right, folks, that's it. Now let's get back to the show. So let's dive into that TQ aspect. So how do you mentioned the formula there. Can we go in a little bit more detail of that? And how do you go about, figuring that out? And then how do you apply it to, essentially everyday life?
Well, there's everything from simple to complex. So I don't know if I could grab it quickly for those watching by video, but
yeah, shoot.
But you want,
and this is why it pays to watch the show.
Amazing. All right. So for those watching, we can go everything from an assessment built on 30 years of Accenture data plus my grad work that measures trust in companies. And that's against the 8-pillar framework, which in essence measures TQ. It measures trust quotient because it's measuring trust aspect. It's the EQ aspects, trusted as an person. The IQ aspects, I'm going to trust you to lead us like you're smart enough to drive this ship and have us land in London or whatever. I'm like, we got to have the IQ. And then we got the TQ, which I can trust your character that when we're, you're going to do what's right for all. You're committed to all. So that's against the 8 pillars. So we would do everything from a big enterprise trust index all the way down to I think I have it here, like a simple, this one's a conversational pulse that any coach that's certified with us can converse with in a boardroom or in a with a leader and just kind of talk to 1 out of 10. How do you feel about this? 1 out of 10. How do you doing with this? And it's kind of 3 questions under each of the 8 pillars. We also have self-assessments that are 24 questions that a leader can just use themselves and say, oh, I see that helps. This might give me an idea of what I should work on. We have trusted 360s, which a 360 assessment takes into account all the people around you that can help you close gaps. We have a team assessment. We even have a simple 5-question assessment that measures trust in customers, because the net promoter score, NPS question is, would you refer us to others or not? Great white paper, great idea. The problem is referrals don't drive referrals. So we want to know why you refer us so I can close that gap and be like, oh, if I close that gap, I'll get more referrals. So that's what that does. So we have for people that are certified, they get access online to see the charts are really cool and close gaps and help people do that. But we do that too. But you're always coming back to the 8 pillars because they are measuring, in fact, TQ.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense, and I like all those different tests and stuff like this. But at the same time, I liked how you had ones for various situations. Sometimes you need that big complex test. Other times you need that 5-minute or that 5-question.
And that's enough for some situations. Like I really like research based. I don't like cheesy whatever, but it's truth is truth too. So in a 5-minute conversation, if I can get to the core by looking at it this way, that can be enough. And frankly, sometimes this conversational diagnostic, which obviously self-assessments are not valid like this one's technology driven. I have a printed copy here, but this is a validated test, right? But sometimes that doesn't mean this isn't as valid. It's just because it's not provable. Because sometimes when we look at it, it's like, oh, I see the issue that would have been found through the technology driven test. So. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've talked about compassion. We've talked about character in the inverse order. Let's talk about competency. Because a lot of people out there right now, they think competency is the end all be all. You have to know what the heck you're doing. You look at any job description. It's like, hey, you have to have X number of months or years of doing this, doing that, the other thing. I'm not a huge fan of that base. I've had Mike Sorelli and George Randall from Echelon Front Overwatch on the show. And they have a book called The Talent War, where they go after, they're like, you want to go after talent, not necessarily the competency part. But I do agree to the premise that you opened up with. You do have to have some kind of competency, right? But there has to be a balance to all that. So
it also depends.
Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do that. All that is, I don't disagree with anything you've said. It's all, I think Buffett and others have said, hire on character, teach the competency. Like, character is harder to teach later. I agree with that. On the other hand, you don't want a surgeon who's just high character and in amputation cuts off the wrong leg because they're not competent, right? So I have actually seen this much more holistically now in my experience on all the work we're doing, that we actually do better if we do. It's some people think it's either or, and I think it's all. There are great people these days, and you can number one, hire no one perfect, but you can hire on a TQ, which is taking in consideration EQ and competent, character. And you can hire for certain competencies. Now, in my business, if I pointed my camera that way through my glass windows in my office, you'd see 5 or so pretty young folks. I've had really pretty good luck with hiring young and training them and really kind of helping them know what, like right out of college, because they were like the top student in college, like they're learners. They didn't have much competency, but because they fit the character and the hunger and all that, they were really good fit. However, we've grown too in ways that we're dealing with complex issues on six continents, and a college student doesn't have the competency that's needed for certain complex consulting issues. There actually needs to be competency and experience. So, I would just all I would say overall is you need all of it to really gain the highest trust that I'm talking about, not just character, but don't that would be first, maybe, or EQ would be one of the first things, but then the other is important. And I would say you also just playing in this environment on the competency pillar, you really need continual learners. I mean, you think about you're interviewing great people, except for me. I mean, you've had some smart ones on, and you've got these great people. You're learning all the time, right? On my Trusted Leader show, that's one of the fun things. I've had the guy that wrote more books than anybody in the world other than the Bible. Wow, what was that? I've read. I get to interview these amazing leaders around the world too, like you, and I'm learning every week. I'm reading. I'm all these things. I want people also that are staying fresh and relevant and capable in some way, because just learners are going to be better in our world that's changing so fast.
Yeah, I live by the mantra of Kaizen, right? Japanese for continuous improvement, which I'm sure you heard of before. That is my personal motto. I'm not a big motto guy, but if you'd say something, that's the one thing I would say is that continuous improvement, continuous learning. Which, oh, by the way, back to a conversation that we had, part of the conversation we had earlier. Do we do our characters change? Yes, because if you went to 20-year-old Scott, if 38-year-old Scott saw 20-year-old Scott, he would like strangle the crap out of him, Homer on Bart style, because it was a complete 180 from that. It was like, oh, once I'm done university, I'm done. That's it. Then I'll get to work. And what I failed to realize at the time, luckily I've learned, is that the moment you stop learning is the moment you become useless, because the world's changing constantly.
In every way. Because you have, how many kids do you have?
I got two boys.
There you go. So I've got 4 kiddos. I mean, you don't stop learning. We have to learn as leaders. We have to learn to be good husbands. We have to learn to be good parents. I mean, we're learning. They didn't give a great handbook on parenting. We read so much on parenting that isn't taught, that isn't real world. I mean, it's like, if we're going to be great at anything, we have to be continual learners. There's a truth in every science. You know this. Business, we say it this way: input equals output, right? Input equals out. What you put in, you get out. But every science says this. Great. The first law of thermodynamics, a great German physicist: energy you put in is the same as the energy you get out. Theology or farming, you reap what you sow. Psychology, physiology, you eat a bad bowl of chili, bad output, right? Psychology, thoughts that go in lead to desires, which lead to actions. This competency pillar, you got to put good input in if you want great output. And that's the same in life. If I put certain things in my body, I get certain things out of it. I put certain things into my brain. My audiences, the people I consult, the executives, presidents of countries and companies, they get different things out of it. A marriage, you put certain input in, you get certain things out of it. So this competency, keeping fresh and relevant and capable and putting good input in the mind, body, everything, that's critical for health, and especially when you started with self-leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about, 3 of the 8 pillars. I want to throw a couple scenarios at you and just get your thoughts on that. So the leaders out there listening now, they're frothy at the mouth. They're dying to learn, obviously, right? They want to be the best leaders possible out there. What do you say to the ones that they're sitting here listening to you and go, I don't trust my boss. I don't trust my organization. What's your advice to them? Is it simply get out, go somewhere else, or
no? It's not.
How can you build that?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not saying just trust them. So some people hear me say, "Oh, you believe in that trust stuff? You just go trust everybody." No, well, for whatever they do. So I had at an event, the lady come up to me afterwards, told me what this guy did to her, and said, "I love this. I'm just going to go start trusting him again." Yeah, start trusting him for what he did to you before. Don't trust him for something different. That just like if you're late all the time, I'll trust you to be late. I mean, this isn't being dumb. So first of all, I would say this: most of my work is around what individuals can do. So you got a poisonous boss. I'm going to get to some things you can think about, but mostly I really want to direct back to what can we do? Because I can't tell you how many times I'm at an event. After the event, I'm signing books at the back, and people are in line, and someone says to me, David, I love that stuff you talked about. I love this trust stuff. I believe it. I agree with it. I try to live it. I believe it. Man, I wish my boss would have been here. Man, I wish my spouse needs this stuff. My teenagers should have been here for this because they really need this. Those people need this. And the truth is, they're not here. You're here and I'm here. And I have gaps I can fill every day. And I have things I can do every day. And so, first of all, I would put a bias on focusing what you can do, number one. Now, that doesn't take away toxic bosses or situations. Yes, there is a time to get out. But depending on the level, a couple things you can do. One is I would make the case for, in a respectful way. If you can make the case for trust, that's great. But what I might do is go to my boss or whoever and just show, when you do this, this is actually how people take it. I just don't know. I know your heart. I mean, if you can go respectful and say, you know, I know you want to lead this. I know you've been a great leader in this way. If you can find something positive, some people can hardly find anything positive, but I just want you to know that when this happens, this is actually how people feel, and it costs us. Tying always to cost. It costs us time because people second guess this. It costs us money because people don't put resources in the right place. It costs us because there's always a cost. So if you can say, affirming someone a little bit. I'm not a fan of manipulative. Like people have said, do an appreciation sandwich whenever you do performance reviews. Say something good, say something bad, say something good. Barf. I don't want to do manipulation. But if you can authentically say, hey, or at least honor the fact that they're a leader. Okay, hey, you're a leader. I'm grateful to get to be here if you are. I mean, you want to be whatever it is that you can be authentic about. Don't give not truth, but something you can find a truth that starts at positive, just so that it opens the mind a little bit. But then it is kind of this process of, I just want you to know this in case you want to know how it affects people. This is costing us when you do this, and it hurts people. You might not think this might not be your context of growing up, but this costs. I have not always had the guts to do that. I remember my first leadership role, actually, where the leader above me walks out the boardroom asking a question and shutting the door at the same time. He was not a listener. I, in my natural self, am not a good listener. I want to be. I believe in it. The research shows the impact of it. But I am so like I'm the guy that's like, Lord, give me patience and give it to me right now. I mean, like I'm going. So I have to work on that. But I watched what happened in that room, especially with him not listening to women. And he was out the next year, and I was in as director. And it changed me and my way of doing things because I saw the negative. But what I should have probably said something to him. But anyway, there's a lot of ways we could go with that. One idea is if you can't have a conversation tied to cost, that's a way. Some people are sitting there saying, there's no way I'm having a conversation at all. It's horrible, blah, blah, blah. There's other things you can do, but there's one tip.
Yeah. My advice from personal experience. So I had a direct, basically direct supervisor mentioned something that publicly that should not have been mentioned. And on a Friday afternoon, I stewed on that for all weekend. So, and I'm talking like this is so I don't know if you know my background, but I'm actually a senior Canadian Army officer. So this is when I was a junior, brand new, and our officer commanding made a comment about something about me. And I stood on it all weekend. And then finally on Monday, I said, no, I'm not going to let this slide. So I walked in his office, shut the door, said, we need to have a chat, boss. And my advice is, you stick to the moral high ground. Don't sling mud because they slung mud. Stick to facts and stick to the moral high ground. And at the end, he apologized. He's like, wow, I didn't think of it from that context. I just tried to make a joke, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, guess what? No one should have heard that for these reasons and all this shit. So that's always been my best advice to people.
Good advice.
Good
advice.
So the next scenario I want to throw at you though is the listener out there who's listening to this and going, am I trustworthy? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm the one that's toxic. Maybe I'm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where's the best place for them to start? How do they get going?
Well,
Start writing that ship.
yeah, there's two things. One, if you want to do a trusted 360, that's a way because you learn gaps. You'd be able to do that but we can help with that. That's how we assess trust in an individual. The other is just without all that and contacting us, it's just pause for a second, write these 8 pillars down, go to a coffee shop or a pub or a park or by yourself and look at those 8, understand what they are. Like, we've gone through this so quickly, but understand, and ask for each one. There's some questions in the book, but just ask, am I being clear in these ways? I mean, let's take that first pillar as an example. Okay, so it's an easy one to understand. Like, okay, for the leader, they might, maybe one of the most important clarities is be clear about the vision, right? For the manager, maybe one of the most important parts of clarity is clarity of the expectations to those below them. Maybe for the salesperson, clarity of benefits. Like, they're super clear, I'm so clear, but I'm not clear about the benefits of the product, right? For the teacher, maybe there's a teacher that the kids don't like. And the principal, nobody can figure out why they don't like this teacher. High character teacher, compassionate teacher. But that teacher is so unclear about the assignments, the kids go home frustrated every day. So even in that case, it was actually a clarity issue, not a character issue, as people might assume. So I might just, if you're not going to do a kind of validated assessment of it, that's one way, is to pause and just look at these 8 and think, what are my gaps here? We all have gaps. What's my key one? And then think about, what can I do to start building that? Now, in the book, in Trusted Leader, different than my other books, the first portion is a great story. It's a business leadership parable to have people shift thinking about trust, so they see trust from a different lens. And the last half is actionable tips for how I can apply this tomorrow morning, right? But in that story, even Ethan, he really is kind of a trustworthy guy that's in character, in his marriage, in all these other ways, but he's not trusted by his team. And this epiphany that I can be kind of trustworthy in one way, but actually I'm not trusted, that's kind of that's something. So anyway, he has an epiphany there and realization. So I'm saying 3 things. 1, self-reflect on the 8. Number 2, if you want to get a 360 assessment, trustedge.com, we can help you with that. Number 3 would be to ask and create space. Ask people that you trust. Hey, this is the problem with most people and customers. Like, they do all these new initiatives and they don't ask a customer what they most want, so they create the wrong products, right? Same with a leader. They don't ask their people, what could I do? Like, is there any gaps I have under these, or is there anything that really, like, with questions, and then stop and actually listen.
No, I absolutely love it. Love it. So one of my jobs, I was a officer commanding. So I commanded a squadron of 200 military members, and I empowered both my my second in command and my right hand man, my squadron sergeant major, said, whenever you walk in, you shut that door, and you let me have it, because you don't know. Right. Sometimes, you just don't know. And you need to empower the people to basically tell you straight up. Because if they're too fearful to let you know, then you're never going to know. Your blind spots don't get revealed. And then you just keep going down the wrong path. And then that's going to erode all those different 8 pillars, erode trust. And suddenly you don't have that peak performing team, peak performing organization, nor are you a peak performing leader. You're actually the inverse of all that. So.
I need to write something down that you said. You inspired me to think about something. Actually, see, I need to. And boy, I'm a pen writer. I'm a writer. So I gotta. There we go. There's my.
Look at that! Like, this is actually, I love this. I'm gonna keep this in, because to show the authenticity of conversations like this and the power of conversations like this. Because the reality, what you're showing right there, is that despite being the high functioning leader you are, we never know it all. And apparently I know something, because you just wrote it down.
You definitely know something, but also, even in our own mind, a conversation and human touch, we jog our own minds to think of something that we might not have thought of for a while, or something like I'll still remember this. The first time I taught a leadership piece at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, which would be on the U.S. side, that's one of the top 5 military academies. Okay, I'm 20-something years old. all these cadets, I don't know if there was 1,000 or whatever, but the commanding officer, Michael Olfoltos, who is now an admiral, which is equal to general, admiral in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
So he sat in the front row taking notes from me, a 20-something, sitting there taking notes furiously, and I thought, that example of humility. He's a double PhD, and he's all these things, and I'm like, wow. And that's an example of that's who we want to be like. And so anyway,
Awesome.
but you did get me something. I mean, this was authentic. Like, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. David, this has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, I do want to respect your time and start to butt up here. So before we wrap up, I do got a couple last questions for you. First being a question I ask all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. As according to you, David, what makes a great leader?
Well, it's simple and it's very complex. Trust.
I probably could have said that. I probably could have said that myself.
That's all I'm going to give you. I've talked too much every other time. I felt like today, wow, I went on a rant instead of going back and forth more with questions. So there you go. Trust. That's it. It's it. Trust is always the core issue. Trust is the key. How you get there is complex. You got to do the work.
No, absolutely. And the work is not easy. And hence why we have great people like yourself and myself doing the work we do to help others get there and take a lot less time and money and not making so many mistakes.
So to that point, most people waste millions on leadership development because they don't do what works and they don't do it the right way.
That's right. Final question of the show. How can people find you? How can they follow you? Shameless plugs are allowed. It's all about you right now.
Well, I mean, and everything about me wants to serve others. That's so trustedleaderbook.com. That's one place to find it, or anywhere books are sold. It's Trusted Leader, not just like Facebook. Take off the word the, not the Facebook. It's not the Trusted Leader, just Trusted Leader, the red book. So that would be one way right now. That's just gotten great reviews. I'd love it if people would review or let people know on Amazon. It's great. Number two, Trust Edge is our main site. You can get free research and assets there. But if anybody wanted a demo, if they're like, I'm an executive coach and I would love these tools to use with my people, I would love to be a part of this coaching community, or I'm a chief learning officer, I want to use this in this organization, or I'm a mid-level manager, I want to use this in our organization, then just for free, you ought to go to trustedgecoaching.com and get a free demo of what we offer, because it is so cool and now priced so much less than we used to be, that it's just this amazing platform, community, and support of people that are really driving performance on trust around the world.
Awesome. And for you, the listener, it's easy as always. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/176. And they're in show notes. David, my friend, fantastic conversation. Loved every second of it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Scott.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.